up, guys? I'm Brianna Skiffington. We are a performance marketing agency that has a pretty large portfolio in the trades, mostly mid-market to enterprise. And as Johnny mentioned, we've been using this kind of technology to integrate revenue into the ads platform for several years. So I'm going to talk about the advantages of that and what we've seen for our clients. So been fortunate enough to get to work with Google in my career. I think I've audited about over 1,000 ad accounts, so have seen the good, the bad in the industry. And in doing so, visited about 6 different Google campuses for things like partner training, product betas, client workshops, things like that. And the reason they let me in and continue to is because of the certifications that I've had for about 10 years on each of their products. And one of the struggles that we had as an agency in the very beginning, and especially getting into this industry, is it became very competitive on cost per lead, right? When being interviewed by prospective clients, it was a lot of, how much can you get me an electrical lead for? How much can you get me a plumbing lead for, right? And we were noticing that, of course, there's a ton of videos on Facebook and everything like that, right, where people are touting, oh, I can get you $5 leads all day, right? We were sick of competing on that and really looking for ways to drive more value. So we were looking for ways to technologically integrate CRMs with the ads platform so that we could actually see and prove that our campaigns were better because we were looking for higher quality leads. Right? So you'll notice, I'm sure you've seen on Facebook, oh, $5 cost per lead. You know, that's really easy to achieve when you don't have any qualifiers on your audience targeting, when you have an automatic form fill where you basically hit 2 buttons by accident maybe, and then it auto-populates your information and sends it off to a company. How many people here have seen a $5 lead turn into a $10,000 system, for example? No hands. Okay. There's a lot of that, right? So the issue with that is when you're going to scale your business based on cheap leads that you've vetted all these agencies to see who could get you the lowest price per lead, you're going to notice that when you go to scale, you're only going to get more of those mediocre leads, right? That doesn't really grow your business. Whereas if you optimize towards high quality leads that you know generate revenue for you and you look for more customers like them, when you do want to scale, then you're able to actually drive more good quality leads and generate more revenue. And this is a real example of what we're actually able to see as an agency within the interface of Google Ads and why that's so powerful. So you'll see on the left side here, and this is back in the day, 3-4 years ago, this was all any agency had access to, really, there was not really a great ability to import revenue data into the ads interfaces. So that's like the archaic way of optimizing, right? You'd look at campaign A and campaign B. You'd probably make decisions based on that CPA, which is a cost per conversion, like a form fill or a phone call. And you'd be like, okay, campaign A is kicking ass, right? I'm getting $88 cost per lead. I love that. I want more of them. Let's turn that one up, turn campaign B down. It's doing terrible, right? What we've been doing for a few years since we've been integrating ServiceTitan revenue into the ads platforms is actually exposing the additional metric here of conversion value, where you're able to see the revenue. And this is a very high-level example at a campaign level, but in the actual interface, you're able to see it literally at an audience level, an ad level, a keyword level, a match type level, a day of week, hour of day. It exposes all types of insights that you can not only optimize off of in the interface, but that the smart bidding uses to leverage all of their data across all their 8 platforms. I think it's 1 billion plus users to generate more revenue for you based on the data you're feeding it, right? But just at a very human high level, you can see, obviously, like you would be, if you're able to use ServiceTitan to push your revenue back into the ads platforms, and any agency that is using this kind of technology, you're actually able to make optimization decisions off of that data and decide, oh, I don't really care about that $88 cost per lead. I care about the $12 generated for every $1 I spent, which is, a $16,000 system maybe on campaign B. Right? So infinitely more powerful. This always leads to the next question, which is, what is a good return on ad spend? And I'll touch on return on ad spend in case you don't know. It's just revenue divided by cost. It is basically ROI, but instead of saying a 500% ROI, you would say a 5-to-1 a ROAS. So $5 in for every $1 out, basically. So these are just some common numbers. I like to touch on this because it really emphasizes the power of prospecting. So prospecting is when you're advertising on terms like HVAC repair instead of, your brand name McDowell's Air, for example, right? While you might look at these numbers and be like, intuitively, of course, you want to spend as much as possible on the highest dollar amount you're generating, or on the highest return on ad spend you're generating, which would be brand, right? There's only so many people who know your brand name. It's about, whoever you've advertised to, your existing customers, if you're on TV, radio, things like that, those are going to be the people who are searching for your brand name. But there's not a ton of that, right? It's pretty much contingent upon the time you've been in business and the amount of advertising you've done historically. The real power of scale is typically in prospecting. Now, LSA is pretty good too. Obviously, everybody here, I'm sure, loves LSA. As you can see, it is typically not that scalable, and that's the problem, right? Is you can spend, and this is a real example of one of our clients, they can spend about $250,000 a year on brand because they spend a ton on TV and radio. They can maybe spend about $500,000 on LSA because they've spent years developing all of their reviews, so it's really easy for them to actually get some scale there. Not many businesses can reach this number. But on prospecting, on Google Ads, just buying terms like HVAC repair or air conditioning cost, a new unit cost, they can spend a lot more, about $5 million. Thinking about it in the context of that return on ad spend, you might be like, wait, it doesn't really sound that great if I can only get a 5 return on ad spend on this, right? I might just opt out of the generic prospecting Google Ads and stick with the brand and LSA, right? But you'd really be limiting yourself in terms of the revenue you can drive on prospecting. So again, these are all like real examples of a real client. Spending the $500,000 on LSA to generate $5 million, that's pretty awesome. But do you want to be a $5, $10 million business, or do you want to be a $50, $100 million business? That's where the power of Google Ads prospecting or paid search prospecting comes in, even though it's really not a great return on ad spend in a silo. But you can see still in that silo, contextually, like in the whole perspective of all the other channels you can work with, it's typically the most scalable. And hence why it's been such a big focus for ServiceTitan, for us to be able to integrate your revenue data to make the most of that channel because it is the most scalable. So looking at this example, this is you might be at a blended 10% marketing cost on something like what we were just looking at. And the reason I like to call this out is because, yes, you can get a lower marketing cost. Yes, LSA performs infinitely better than Google Ads. Yes, Google Ads in a silo as a channel at a 5-to-1 is a 20% marketing cost, and that sounds like shit, right? But blended with other things like LSA, your organic presence, and other channels, it's actually not bad. A 9% marketing cost is pretty reasonable, and that's just for new customer acquisition, right? So if we look at it in the actual context of what businesses are typically doing over time, you're making that investment in the beginning to acquire new customers. But what it's really generating for you is a recurring customer base over time. So you're building your customer database. You have these people you can tap into in shoulder season. You have memberships in here. Although in the beginning, you might be at a 10% marketing cost, as you go and grow, you don't have to spend that much to activate your existing memberships or your existing client database, right? It might be your Marketing Pro membership to be able to send out emails and SMS, but that's a really negligible cost in the context of the value of that database, right? Imagine doing that for 50 years, having a pretty healthy, long-standing company. With a database like that, suddenly you've got an additional $50 million of revenue unlocked. Again, these are all real examples. And then suddenly you have a 4.5% marketing cost. Not that bad. So really, it's the cost of investing in the beginning. This is from the SBA, the Marketing Percentage of Budget to Revenue Guide. As you can see, obviously, if you are a long-established business, you might need to spend less on marketing. If you're in growth mode, if you're a startup, you might need to spend more. These are how these numbers wash out in the context of all the channels you can use to drive your revenue. So although nobody likes spending more money, in the context of what you can actually generate from it, the revenue, it's really not bad. And the reason that's so important is because the most scalable channel is now infinitely more scalable and more efficient because of the integration with ServiceTitan that you're able to utilize with Marketing Pro Ads Optimizer. Now, I mentioned that we've been utilizing this technology for a few years. Very similar concept. It's essentially the integration of revenue from CRMs into the ads platforms. NextGen, I don't know if anybody here has heard of that little company, but they've grown pretty exponentially over time. Last year, they grew from about 50 to 100 million in 1 year. Ishmael, they've been around for about, I think, 6 or 7 years, and it's obviously he makes huge waves in the industry, just the way that he's been able to scale and grow so quickly, right? But we like to point out that a good chunk of that scale was actually driven by Google Ads non-brand prospecting revenue. We actually developed this integration that we've been utilizing in the beginning in 2021. We've been utilizing it for about 2.5 years. It is obviously infinitely more efficient, but infinitely more scalable because of the revenue data that we're now exposing in Google Ads with the ServiceTitan revenue we're able to see. So you go from, I believe in 2020, they were generating about $2 million a year off Google Ads. This year, they'll do about 40, which obviously is a huge portion of their business. So that's all due to the efficiencies that we've been able to establish and double down on that compounds over time into revenue from that ServiceTitan data. Now, I'm about to reveal some agency secret sauce. It is more good and less bad. But essentially, what we do with this data that's in ServiceTitan and with what any agency will do, what anybody will do for you, so long as they have this integration, because again, most do not yet, is make better decisions simply on the numbers that you see. So at a campaign level, if you're seeing higher return on ad spend on the campaign 1, for example, give it more budget. If you're seeing low return on ad spend on another campaign, give it less budget as you optimize. So this is literally a real example screenshot from the interface. One of these has a 2 return on ad spend. Obviously, we don't want to spend a ton there. Another has a 6.4. Let's do more of that. Really crazy, revolutionary stuff we're doing here. Same concept with bidding. Whether you're on target ROAS or target CPA, please be on smart bidding. Do not work with anybody doing manual bidding for you. You're able to see we're actually able to optimize bids as well. So budget bids are manual things that you're able to do to double down on the results that you're able to see from each of these items, right? So we've got a 10 return on ad spend on this one keyword that we're exposing here and a 4 on this one. Let's do more of the 10 and less of the 4 until we can't do it anymore, right? And those are just the really simple human things that you're able to do with this. Google Ads actually uses 70 million data points in 100 milliseconds in real time, essentially, for every auction, for every search that happens. So if you're giving them your ServiceTitan data and they have your audience data beyond what you're even able to see in the interface, plus all the permutations of all of that data that can happen in real time. It's not someone sitting there like adjusting a bid by $1, right? You're able to multiply your revenue literally, and that's how we've been able to see those kind of results with NextGen, and we've been able to do it thanks to ServiceTitan and that integration. So I will kick it back to Johnny.
Thank you, Bree.